Acts chapter 14. We're into another chapter. The Paul and Barnabas left Pisidian Antioch, which is in northern Turkey, or what is today northern Turkey, and went to Iconium. So that's where we pick it up. Verse 1. At Iconium, Paul and Barnabas went as usual into the Jewish synagogue. Now, this is a little bit interesting to me because Paul had been resisted so powerful. I mean, the Jews at Pisidian Antioch were so angry with him and against what he was doing. They pretty much ran him out of town, and he and Barnabas shook the dust off their feet as they were leaving. And part of what Paul said was, okay, we're done with you Jews. Now we take the message to the Gentiles. But here they start in the synagogue. Well, okay, the reason is that the synagogue would have been the place where they would have encountered God-fearing people. So they went as usual to the Jewish synagogue. There they spoke so effectively that a great number of Jews and Greeks believed. But the Jews who refused to believe stirred up the other Gentiles and poisoned their minds against the brothers. A little bit of a pattern is emerging here. The Jews who refuse to believe, they stir up anger, resentment, confusion, later on even violence. Well, okay. They poison their minds. That was not a one-off thing. That happens all the time, doesn't it? I don't care which side of the political aisle you have yourself. Social media has the ability to bring great, positive, uplifting, and encouraging things into our world. But boy, does it also have the power to poison minds. So it's not a new thing. Okay, verse 3. So Paul and Barnabas spent considerable time there, speaking boldly for the Lord, who confirmed the message of his grace by enabling them to perform signs and wonders. In spite of the fact that the Jews had poisoned the minds of lots of people, we don't know the number, in Iconium, Paul and Barnabas continued to spend their time speaking boldly for the Lord. Well, that also is an emerging pattern. When the doors were opened, they didn't wait around until they were wide open. They walked through the doors, and their mission and purpose was to proclaim, speak boldly for the Lord. And in Iconium, God confirmed the message of his grace by enabling them to perform signs and wonders. I know this is so obvious, but I have to say it. Obvious or not. It wasn't Paul or Barnabas who worked themselves up and did these signs and wonders. It wasn't the people who had such great faith that God then was obligated to perform signs and wonders. It was God working through his willing, available servants, Paul and Barnabas. The reason I'm saying this is because there are still today, there are times when I see and hear other of people kind of claiming that they're doing this for God. They got it backwards. God is doing it through them if it's God. Okay, never mind. Verse 4, the people of the city were divided. Some sided with the Jews, others with the apostles. Kind of how life goes, isn't it? There was a plot afoot among both Gentiles and Jews, together with their leaders, to mistreat them and stone them. So now this animosity had transitioned further toward violence. And, verse 6, but they found out about it and fled to Lycaonian cities of Lystra and Derbe into the surrounding country, where they continued to preach the gospel. If you look on if you click up on your computer a map of Iconium, you see that Iconium is about 120 miles inland from the Mediterranean Sea in what is today Turkey. It was about 140 some miles from between Pisidian Antioch and Iconium, but Lystra and Derbe were very close. I mean, they were just a few miles from Iconium. Okay. They continued to preach the gospel when they got to Lystra and Derbe. They were very close together geographically. Verse 8, in Lystra, there sat a man who was lame. He'd been that way from birth and had never walked. In ancient times, if you were crippled, you were cursed to live in poverty. You had to be taken care of by other people. Most cripples were beggars. We don't know whether he was, but he was easily in that category. In verse 9, he listened to Paul as he was speaking. Paul looked directly at him and saw that he had faith to be healed. I wonder how Paul saw that. Could have been in his obvious attention that he was leaning into every word. And I don't know. Paul saw it, though, somehow, that he had faith to be healed. And we're getting into what I think is sometimes a confusing area of belief. It is for me. So how much faith does it take to be healed? I have friends who have difficult, even debilitating illnesses that are apparently not being healed, in spite of the fact of, maybe in spite of is not the right way to say it, but even though many, many, many prayers of people of faith are going up, and these individuals suffering from these diseases are not without faith, and yet they're not being healed. No matter how you slice it, no matter how you want to look at it, God still is fully capable of healing people, and he does, I think I can say, all the time. But he doesn't, apparently he doesn't heal everyone for reasons that I don't get, that I don't understand. In this situation, Paul saw this lame guy and he saw that he had faith to be healed. Verse 10, Paul calls out stand up on your feet. Don't When you tell a lame guy to stand up on his feet, if he didn't have faith, he would have said, "What? Come on. There's no reason to make fun of me." But at that, the man jumped up and began to walk. Does this sound anything at all like what Peter and John, as they entered the temple around 3 o'clock? Remember back when I don't have silver, I don't have gold. What I have, I give to you. Rise, stand up. And the guy did. He went leaping and walking and praising God. There's a real strong kind of, at least a similarity here. Stand up on your feet. At that, the man jumped up and began to walk. I wish we had more written about what went through this lame man's mind. We don't even know his name. For me, it would have been so, at the very least, it would have been so interesting to have interviewed this guy. What was going through your mind, and how tell us more about what happened. But all we have is the event. Verse 11, when the crowd saw what Paul had done, they shouted in the Lycaonian language, "The gods have come down to us in human form." Well, but bear in mind, this was not a Christian culture. There were Jews here, but they were in the vast minority. These were people whose religion was we look at it and say it was mythology. Okay. Verse 12, Barnabas they called Zeus, and Paul they called Hermes, because he was the chief speaker. In other words, it wasn't like they're going, "Wow, that's amazing." They were saying, these are the gods, and these are two of the primary big dudes in both Roman and Greek mythology. The priest of Zeus, whose temple was just outside the city, brought bulls and wreaths to the city gates because he and the crowd wanted to offer sacrifices to them. There is nothing in our experience to connect with this. They were so convinced that these guys, that Paul and Barnabas were gods, the priest at the temple of Zeus brought bulls and wreaths. They were going to have a sacrifice to these. It wasn't like, well, we'll throw a big party. No, it was way past that. Okay. Verse 14. But when the apostles Barnabas and Paul heard of this, they tore their clothes and rushed out into the crowd. The tearing of clothes was a long-standing tradition among Jews, either for grief or for, what's the word I'm looking for? They were very upset, okay? And they tore their clothes and they rushed out into the crowd shouting, "Friends, why are you doing this? We too are only human like you. We are bringing you good news, telling you to turn from these worthless things to the living God who made the heavens and the earth and the sea and everything in them." So it was almost it was like what he says, these gods that you want to worship, they're worthless. And he calls them to repentance, turn from that to the living God. We'll pick it up there next time on So Care with Stevie Boy.